My name is Olivia Broadhurst and I'm the Climate Change Innovation Hub Coordinator at the Whitsunday Regional Council. Today I have invited Ian Edwards to join us to provide a presentation on climate-related financial disclosure. Ian presented this presentation recently at an event and we had some really great feedback, so we wanted to record it, and he's kindly agreed to do it again so that we can really provide this information to everybody at the time that they'd like to watch it at their own convenience. Ian is an industry fellow with Griffith University and he is also a consultant for Informed City. He works with the financial sector and city councils in Australia and New Zealand, and we are also lucky to have him as an associate advisor at the Climate Hub on our Climate Hub advisory panel. So welcome, Ian, and thank you. Take it away.
All right, no worries. Hello, everyone. Look, I hope you find this this presentation informative. Now, look, what I want to take you through now is climate-related financial disclosure, and you may think this is the most, boring and vanilla subject known to man, but it's a subject which has ramifications for you, and it's something around climate change that it's important to be across and to understand to an extent, because ultimately, as I'll show, it has implications, for all of us, and will continue, or will have growing ramifications as time progresses. So listen, so what I'm going to quickly do is I'm going to take you through what climate-related financial disclosure is. Who wants it? What are the driving factors? Why has it evolved? How is it organised? Who's doing it? And as I alluded to before, why should we care? So the first thing is, what is it? Well, it's sort of as it sounds out of the box. Climate-related disclosure is actually about companies disclosing both their exposure to and how they're managing climate change risk, and also how they're leveraging any opportunities that evolve as economies transition towards net zero carbon economies, and as society becomes more resilient and learns and moves to deal with more extreme weather events. Now, the disclosure is interesting because at the end of the day, it's all about where the rubber hits the road. Where the rubber hits the road is what are the financial impacts of climate-related risks and opportunities on an organisation. That's ultimately what the standard setters who are basically getting involved and creating the standards around climate disclosure are looking for. Now, climate disclosure has been around for a long time, actually, but it's sort of coalesced in the last couple of years through various organisations, and I'll take you through that in a second. But it's sort of moving towards standardised disclosure that is, as I've got on the screen, relevant, complete, understandable, comparable and reliable. And that word comparable is really important because up to date there have been numerous standards and ways that you can disclose climate-related risks and the impacts for your company, but they haven't been comparable. So investors, for example, haven't been able to vote with their feet, if you like, based on who's managing this risk in a better way. And this comparability enables that. So the other thing I just want to mention about disclosure is, if you think about accounting standards, which many of us and all of us who have small businesses even, or certainly at a corporate space, have been involved in, that's where this is heading. It's sort of disclosure of climate-related risks is starting to align with our financial disclosure requirements, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit. Now, who's driving this and where has it come from? Well, it's been predominantly driven by two groups of stakeholders. The first stakeholders who are looking and want corporates to disclose their climate risk are actually investors, and in particular institutional investors. So the group that I've got on the screen there are the investor group on climate change. They are represented in Australia, and as you can see, they represent institutional investors who look after the funds for almost 7.5 million people in Oz, and who manage assets of around $3.6 trillion. Globally, the investor group on climate change represent institutional investors that manage around $33 trillion in assets. So that's your investments, for example, your superannuation funds, your mutual funds. So this is real, and this is the financial sector really getting involved and looking to understand what the climate risks of their investments are, how they're exposed and how they're managing those risks. The other stakeholders who've driven this are actually the central banks and the financial supervisors globally. So the likes of APRA and ASIC in Australia, the Bank of England in the UK, and various others around the globe. And they're concerned because they see climate change as a potential systemic risk to the integrity of the financial system. So they're also looking to understand how certainly the financial sector and the larger, in the first instance, corporate sector are managing these risks to ensure that there's not going to be a flow-on effect which will actually impact the integrity of the financial sector itself. Now, the next thing is how are these disclosure requirements organised? Well, the first institution that really kicked this off is the and has defined the disclosure standards, if you like, and the expectations around what will be disclosed by corporations is the TCFD, and the TCFD stands for the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures. Now, this was an initiative that was established by the Financial Stability Board in December 2015. And the Financial Stability Board, if you're unaware, is essentially all the group of financial supervisors of the group of 20 countries. So they've defined what they would like to see and how they would like to see this or what they would like to see disclosed around climate-related financial risk. And there's four things. There's governance. They want to know that this risk is being governed at the highest level in an organisation. There is strategy. They want to understand how strategies of corporates are starting to take climate change into consideration and what it means for forward-looking organisations. There's risk management, which of course is around how climate change is being integrated into enterprise risk management systems. And the last one is targets and metrics. So what the TCFD is looking for here is corporations to disclose any targets that they are setting and how they are essentially tracking against those targets. So you may have seen, I don't know, if you read the likes of the Australian Financial Review or any of the financial tabloids or papers out there, there's an increasing, I guess, motivation among certainly the banks in Australia and right across the globe to set, for example, emissions reduction targets. And there's been a lot of concerns that, you know, emission reduction target is set, but then nothing really happens to support that emissions reduction target, which is essentially greenwashing. And you may have heard about that in various parts of the press. These disclosure requirements are all around closing the loopholes to ensure that that doesn't happen. So, okay, so who's actually undertaking and starting to disclose consistent with these requirements? The graph on the screen is the most recent status report from the TCFD around organisations that are actually disclosing in accordance with their expectations. And as you can see, from 2018 to 2021, you know, we've got an increase of, oh gee whiz, that's fivefold in respect to the corporations globally that are disclosing in accordance with TCFD requirements. And in Australia, for example, this includes all the big four banks, Macquarie, for example, pretty well all the big insurers and various other corporates across Australia's corporate landscape. The other thing that's happening is, and to be honest, it's arguable that the TCFD is becoming redundant. It's a voluntary standard, and what we're starting to see is these disclosure requirements made mandatory across various jurisdictions on the planet. EFRAG is a climate standard prototype that's being developed in the EU. That'll be mandatory. The SEC in the States is looking at mandatory disclosure of climate-related risk. And where I do a lot of work at the moment, the XRB, or the External Reporting Board in New Zealand, has actually defined prototype climate-related disclosure standards that will come into force in 2023 for certain corporates in New Zealand who will mandatorily have to disclose their climate-related risks and how they're managing those in accordance with, you know, the various typology that I discussed before. Now that's really interesting, but the one that sort of made me almost fall off my chair is the next one, and that's the IFRS. Now, I'm actually a chartered accountant by trade. I've spent my life working all over the globe in various capacities as an accountant, and one of the things that we do when we put our little green caps on and sit in the back room under a fluorescent light is we create financial reports. And these financial reports, as I mentioned before, are defined in accordance with accounting standards. And one of the main accounting standards boards globally is the IFRS, which is the, what is it? It's the International Financial Reporting Standard. And those standards are pretty well complied with across the globe, in every single country across the globe, except for the United States, who have FASB standards. Now, recently, as in late last year, the IFRS actually created a board called the ISSB, and that is the International Sustainability Standards Board. And that board, the first cab off the rank of that particular board is defining climate-related disclosure standards. So in other words, what I'm trying to say here is that these standards are now being adopted by the accounting boards and the big ones, the big important ones at that. So corporates who disclose in accordance with IFRS, what I see coming, and there's no doubt that it is, they will be starting to disclose in accordance with the ISSB requirements also. So they'll be required to disclose their exposure to climate-related risks, and once again, how they're managing those risks. Now, the question is, why should we care? Well, the reason is this. When the TCFD requirements were first published, they were directed specifically to Wall Street, or in other words, the financial sector. Now, the risks of the financial sector are essentially the risks of the customers that they lend to and insure. They essentially assume those risks. So if they're going to disclose their risks, they need to understand the risks of all of their customers, as in all of the real economy, if you like, down on Main Street. So, for example, the work that I'm doing in New Zealand at the moment is, you know, we're looking at the risk of climate change to businesses, to mortgagees and to mortgages, so that the bank can understand what those risks are and manage those risks appropriately, not only from a disclosure perspective, but from a risk management perspective for the bank as a whole. So in other words, you know, it's a terrible thing to talk about, but if, for example, if you own a house in Lismore and I'm a bank and I've lent you money on that house and I've secured that loan against a particular property in Lismore, and that property may have been flooded twice in a very short period of time, of course, that decreases the value of that property. It decreases the quality of and the integrity of the loan that I've made to you, and I need to start disclosing that and you know, ultimately incorporate what that means on the financial integrity of my balance sheet. So I'm really starting to get very interested in how you're managing your climate risk and how exposed you are to that climate risk also. So in other words, by sort of honing in on the financial sector, it's very, very smart, because the financial sector at the end of the day is the guts and is at the centre of all economies. So for the financial sector to understand its risk, it needs to understand the risk of everyone else in the economy, and for the financial sector to report on that risk, it needs everyone in the economy to ultimately report on their risk. And that's where things are slowly starting to go. They're not there yet, but there's no doubt it's heading in that direction. So for sure, you know, that is a very, very good reason to understand what your climate risk is, to start considering it and sort of thinking about, well, how are you exposed and how might you manage it? Because whether you like it or not, it's coming along one pathway or another. So look, I'll wrap it up there. Hopefully that's food for thought and things to think about. You know, if anyone wants to discuss this or they're interested, I'm sure that, you know, we can probably present this at some future date, you know, locally in the Whit Sundays, or you know, potentially, you know, feel free to contact me via Olivia. Anyway, thanks for your time, and thanks, Olivia.
Thanks, Ian. That was really interesting. I think it's a bit of another world for people that aren't like in the financial sector or already understanding their risks. So it's something that I think in the Whit Sundays in particular, we're pretty good at managing natural disaster risk. You know, we're used to cyclones and things like that, but thinking about climate change as a different risk and something that we need to really think about, not only for our businesses but at home, is something that we all need to kind of really quickly move towards improving our understanding of. So thanks for breaking it down for us. It was really interesting. So